Hi, I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of The Walking Dead Season 8, Episode 3, Monsters. That's right, just when we started to get used to having Luz M. Morales back on the show, Daryl decided this world ain't big enough for another Season 1 survivor. I'm going to talk about Shoot First Daryl in this episode later, along with some subtle connections and deeper insights that you might not normally consider. I also might have come across a pretty huge bombshell, which for a show that is usually pretty obvious about where it's headed and sticks almost religiously to the comics, that's saying something. So hold on to your butts. Let's get started with this week's big question, tweeted to us by Mikey. Is Daryl too far gone? Good question, Mikey, and it's worth discussing. After ruthlessly putting down Morales, even when he knew it was him, as well as the young savior who helped them out later, both times against Rick's wishes, what does this say about Daryl's moral character? Like, is Daryl evil? And Kyle Volkman, I know you disagreed. I just wanted to give you a shout out. Thanks for watching these videos, man. So here's the deal with Daryl. Yes, I do believe he is too far gone, but I also think he's been too far gone for several seasons now. Remember, this is the same guy who fired the first shot in the war against the Saviors by blowing up a handful of them with an RPG in Season 6. He murdered Fat Joey when he escaped the sanctuary, even with Fat Joey begging for his life. And then he joined Rick in slaughtering Gareth and the other Terminus cannibals back in Season 5, and he was really a trigger finger away from blowing away Jesus and Dwight at different points. Daryl has always been a cold killer who doesn't want to hear a debate. It's actually hard to imagine what Daryl would have been before society collapsed, because he seems so driven now, so much a product of this chaotic world. It's actually interesting that Daryl was purely a creation for the show. He's one of the few characters not in the comics. It's almost like when AMC adapted this comic into a human drama, Norman Reedus' Daryl was a natural result of bringing this world to life. So yes, Daryl is too far gone, but he's also too far gone for a reason, to compare to Rick. Rick is a lawman, the moral center of the show, the leader who straddles the line between caution and trust. Daryl is there to show Rick and us what Sheriff Grimes would look like if he totally gave in to caution. That all ties into the deeper meaning of this episode, which I'll get to later. But I should also say that being too far gone doesn't make Daryl heartless or evil either. He's obviously not Negan. The guy just has a soft spot for Carol, let's not forget. But I think his affection for her stems from their shared too far gone worldview. Both of them have shattered their souls, doing the unthinkable that in their eyes had to be done. So really, any love between Carol and Daryl is just a common affection between two very broken hearts. You know, kind of like two chewed-on Lego pieces that somehow fit together. Anyway, Daryl's sudden killing of Morales might also be seen as a callback to Morales' departure back in Season 1. Remember, when Rick and Shane gave Morales a gun and half a box of ammo, Daryl was pissed. So perhaps this grudge came bubbling back up to the surface when he saw Morales pointing a gun at Rick. Like, son of a... We left this asshole with supplies we needed after he abandoned us, and now this is how he returns the favor? F that. Let's actually point out all the other ways this episode connected to past episodes in our segment, Callbacks. Okay, so early in the episode, Ezekiel and Carol's group is surrounded by a bunch of saviors who whistle creepily at them. Obviously, this is a callback to the saviors surrounding Rick and his people back in the Season 6 finale when Negan first appeared on the show. And speaking of whistling, the obnoxious savior Jared whistles that random ballet song as Jesus and Morgan march the prisoners back to the hilltop. You know, the... Except this isn't random. It's Tchaikovsky's Dance of the Mirlitons from the Nutcracker. Like some of you guys, I'm sure. I was dragged to my sister's annual Nutcracker recital, so this music is seared on in my brain. This is actually part of a long tradition of the Saviors referencing classical music. Last season, Eugene played another Tchaikovsky classic, the 1812 Overture, when he set off those homemade fireworks at the sanctuary. Could also be that Jared and Eugene just listened to the same Tchaikovsky's Greatest Hits album. Also earlier last season, Simon blared another classical music song during the Walker attack at the hilltop. That was Gene Sibelius's Finlandia Opus number 26. So my guess is the Saviors are doing this to strike fear into the hearts of their enemies, though in this case, Jared's Nutcracker tune is more playful and lighthearted. Sounds like maybe he's trying to get under Morgan's skin and taunt him. Now, during the scene, Jesus and Morgan debate, with Jesus saying, "We kill, but we do not execute," and Morgan responds, "I have." This is a callback to Morgan's past execution of a man he really didn't need to kill, Richard at the Kingdom. It was Richard screwing around with the melon count that led to Ben getting shot, leading Morgan to kill Richard out of anger. Jared also calls out Morgan's small armor, which belonged to Ben, which I pointed out in past breakdowns. Again, I think it's interesting that this also serves as metaphorical armor, hardening Morgan against the world and having to process his grief. Now, at the end of this episode, Morgan, after getting his ass handed to him by Jesus, flips his shit and says, "I can't be part of this," which is an echo of Carol's sentiments at the end of season 6. Now, it's interesting how Carol's warnings eventually caught up to Morgan, with their own brutality frightening them into isolation. Now, there's definitely a parallel in the way Erik was left bleeding out against a tree, and in season 1, the way we left that guy Jim, along with Morales in the handcuff shot last episode, and the shots of Carl in the premiere. I think this is one of the many nods back to season 1. Now, one other callback I want to point out is the hands-down funniest moment this episode, the first time I've really laughed at The Walking Dead at all this season, Gregory begging to be let back into the hilltop and bickering with Cal over whether or not he ate a little girl's sorghum pancakes. You know Gregory totally ate those pancakes. As we saw last season, this piece of shit secretly hoards food supplies all the time. He hid a box of scotch in his closet. What's to stop him from stealing sorghum from a baby? Moving on, I was going to do a whole Under the Influence section to talk about the cultural references this episode, but really I only kind of felt Rick and Daryl shooting down different ends of the hallway before using spewing gas from a fire extinguisher to mask their escape. It's kind of something you would see out of that arcade game Time Crisis 2. I don't know, I just really enjoyed this action. And Daryl suddenly shooting this savior kid before Rick could stop him reminded me a lot of my favorite episode of the show Breaking Bad, when Todd coldly shoots a kid who witnesses their crime without really consulting anyone else. But really, I want to talk about some visual details I spotted while looking at this imagery closely. So let's take a closer look in our segment, Zoom and Enhance. Okay, now some people were asking about what exactly happened to Erik this episode. Like Aaron left him at the tree, came back later to find a blood stain, and in the distance, a smattering of walkers staggering away. Now Aaron never actually goes after them to check, and Scott keeps telling him that it isn't Erik trying to hold him back. But yeah, if you look closely at that walker, it's wearing the same shirt and jacket tied around his waist that Erik did when Aaron left him. So R.I.P. Erik. While your death was a bit more ambiguous, at least the TV adaptation received a more thoughtful and heartfelt farewell than Erik did in issue number 118 of the comics. And there's an even bigger missable detail I want to talk about, but first I want to quickly thank the sponsor of this video, Vikings War of Clans. If you've never played before, now's the perfect time to start. The new game version is great. It resembles the top PC strategy games of the 90s and 2000s, and now it's on mobile, so you can easily play on a 5-minute break at work. Vikings gives you an option to choose your own play style. Dominate by destroying cities, building impregnable fortresses, or even using diplomacy. Nah, I prefer destroying cities. Really, just play for 5 minutes and you'll see why me and 2 million folks worldwide are addicted to it. Come find me in the game. I'm new Rockstars_Erik. We can play together. So support our channel, download Vikings from the links below, and get our special bonus of 200 gold for a fast and successful start. Okay, back to the episode. Let's talk about this baby Rick found in the Savior outpost, Gracie. Rick mercifully brings this baby with them, handing her off to Aaron to take to the hilltop. But there's a crazy detail that I didn't point out in my last breakdown. In the baby's crib was this stuffed rabbit. We actually saw this stuffed rabbit somewhere else this season in the hands of this little girl in Rick's old man vision at the season premiere. And we all assumed this was Judith or some alternate reality version of Judith, but now I don't think so. I think this is Gracie. So let's activate theory time to dig deeper into what's going on here. Okay, first off, this isn't just a production coincidence. Walking Dead prop master John Sanders confirmed he did have to acquire 2 Velveteen rabbits for the show, one that looks fresh and new and another that looks old and worn. He actually said ordering these rabbits from Scotland was a big ordeal, and he could only get them by explaining to the manufacturer how big a deal they would be on the show. So yeah, I think we're onto something here. So there's a couple scenarios we can look at. One is that this little girl in the vision is Judith, but Rick took Gracie's rabbit and gave it to her, which I guess would be more of a Gregory move. Or maybe the girls just became friends and they, trade toys. But I think the more likely and way darker scenario is the theory I proposed back in my episode 1 breakdown. I think distraught-looking Rick was burying Judith, a character who no longer exists at this point in the comics, and a loved one whose death would definitely be enough to make Rick this upset. Come on, those eyes are just screaming, "Girl!" And now after mercifully rescuing baby Gracie, Rick could bring her in as a new daughter. In fact, this act of mercy here could be connected to that episode being titled Mercy. Let me know what you think, but for now, let's move on to the deeper meaning of this episode. Episode 3 is titled Monsters, bringing up the question, who are the monsters of the episode? The hour forces us to look at the characters like Rick, Morgan, and Daryl in new monstrous lights, as arguably the more villainous side of this war against the Saviors. Early in the episode, Morales uses the word monster to describe Rick, a man who, just like him, is an asshole who will do whatever it takes to keep keep going. And I think this parallelism explains Morales' brief return to the show, just for this one conversation. He's a ghost from the past who reflects Rick's monstrosity back to him, an image of what Rick could have become under slightly different circumstances. But just as Rick begs Morales to find another way, those same words are spoken by Jesus to Morgan, who, like Morales, considers himself beyond redemption. In his eyes, he and everyone else is just another monster waiting to turn. But in a spiritual sense, Morgan's rumble with Jesus almost feels like a symbolic struggle against salvation. Jesus overpowering him is a key reflection of the hope that the show wants to leave us with. As Jesus said, "We kill but we do not execute," meaning we may have to act monstrously at times, but that doesn't make us monsters. And for any pastors watching, feel free to lift that for your sermons on Sunday. But sorry to cut this good Christian moral with a celebration of violence, but that's kind of what The Walking Dead is. So let's check in on this week's kill count. Topping the list as this week's deadliest survivor is Daryl, with 1 walker but 4 on-screen human kills, including the ruthless kills of Morales and that younger savior later on. Given Daryl's role on the show, guys, just expect those bodies to keep piling up. And let's move on to a few predictions for next week's episode, episode 4, titled Some Guy. This episode ended with the cliffhanger of Ezekiel's group under heavy fire at Gavin's compound. Promo footage from episode 4 shows Carol isolated inside that compound and the prized weapon that Rick was after. That is the .50 caliber Browning machine gun that we saw described in Rick's note last episode. As we saw in the final shots, whoever's in control of this thing has a huge advantage in this all-out war. After Erik this episode, I also feel like episode 4 could deliver some more heartbreaking casualties. There was that one shot of Jerry in the trailer when he looked bloodied up and he thanked Ezekiel for being such a cool dude. Seems like that could be from episode 4, and I don't know, it seems a lot more morbid now. Hopefully Jerry won't be the some guy of the episode's title who, lays down his life or something. Do you think Daryl's deadliness makes him less likable, or does it make him more likable? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Now, I want to thank you guys for watching these breakdowns, whether you just started this season or whether you've been watching since season 6. Those of you who've been tweeting me and leaving these supportive comments, guys, it means so much. Now, I know the format has changed to be a little less flashy without all the bells and whistles that we had before, and I totally get the adjustment you guys are having to make. But I also like to think this lets me be more streamlined and just get to the stuff that you really care about, like the connections and the deeper insights, with honestly less of me having to bullshit through some points. Now, I don't want to get too much into it, but we also kind of have to do the Walking Dead breakdowns this way. The biggest reason is that this YouTube adpocalypse stuff that I honestly really don't understand. AMC, more than other networks, is super overprotective of their properties, and these days YouTube will just preemptively take down our videos or demonetize them even when they easily fall under fair use. It's just a huge headache that honestly kept us from breaking down half of season 6, if you guys remember. So to do breakdowns the old way with lots of footage from the episodes would just put a big, stupid, unfair target on our backs. Also, we cover a lot of stuff on this channel and our editors are currently swamped. So me doing Walking Dead breakdowns like this is really the only way you're gonna get any Walking Dead breakdowns, I'm sorry. But again, most of you guys seem to be really enjoying them. So for the rest of you, maybe just pretend like you just stumbled upon these breakdowns this season. Like you would probably just be happy they existed at all, right? But again, thank you guys so much for all your support. We would honestly love to be able to do these videos free from the unfair YouTube restrictions, or sure, having to interrupt them with ads. But really, the best way to help us do that is to contribute to us on Patreon. You can be part of our team and help us decide what content to make and really make our channel truly independent simply for you guys. Big thanks to all of our current team members, especially Christina Armstrong. Hit me up in the comments down below or tweet me at Erik Voss or follow New Rockstars on Twitter at New Rockstars for updates on our videos. And like and share this video and subscribe to New Rockstars on this channel for more analysis of The Walking Dead and other stuff that you love. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.